Well, hello again, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Carpo's Rambles. Today I have a couple of things I'd like to talk about regarding music, musicians, record collectors, audiophiles, and I guess you could consider it maybe an addendum to the video I made yesterday, which was that audiophiles are ridiculous, and I kind of went off on the quote audiophile community, if you want to call it that. It's more of an echo chamber and an argument community. And I'm going to point out why I'm talking about this, as well as why I think it's important to point out. Why are musicians and music lovers and stereo people so snobby, especially toward other people who are, say, new to it? And today I've been organizing my back office. I haven't made a video back here in like 2 years. This is where I store all my stuff. But I organized it and rearranged and wanted to make this, set up a lot of the records. I had at a garage sale last year. They were all in boxes and bins, and I stacked a few of them here. This is a very small part of my collection that I have. I've got several U-Haul boxes just stacked up in here. Whole bunch out there, maybe 1,500 to 2,000, somewhere around there. And I've collected them over several years, well, a couple decades. And I go through phases. I'll become obsessed with records for a while, then I'll get into stereos. And for a while, I was collecting vintage receivers. I've got a whole stack of Pioneer XX 737s and 750 and Akai and Onkyo and Yamaha and Sansui, whole bunch of speakers and random stuff. And I went through a phase where I was really into audio. And I liked to at least consider that I consider myself a person who can identify what sounds good. And as I said before, I've spent, hours setting up different components in my living room, switching out between speakers, trying different cables, different stereos, different everything. And came to the conclusion quite a while back that really none of that shit matters. It's what you expect that matters. If you sit down and you expect to hear a good song and you want it to sound good, it will often sound good. If you expect it to sound bad, it will sound bad. This is above and beyond the obvious. You need decent speakers. You can't take a, $20 cheap ass Chinese speakers and hook them up to a crappy receiver and play an MP3 through it and expect it to sound like a vinyl recording or an original MFSL, vinyl recording. But this is what I'm getting at here. I don't want to make this too long. In the vinyl record collecting community, because while I was cleaning out back here and organizing, I was listening from the back room. Some YouTube videos were kind of playing, autoplay. And it was people talking about how they love collecting records, but the community just seems so rude. And like I said in a previous video, people tread lightly. They don't want to talk bad about like certain things or say, well, this doesn't sound good or this does sound good. One guy even had a video saying, why do, audio reviewers listen to such crappy music? And in reality, I understand you get to a point when you're obsessed with sound. Like I said, I call them, they're tone chasers. They're chasing a certain sound, a certain tone. It happens with guitarists too and musicians. They have 50 pedals in front of them and 100 effects, and they spend all day trying to fuck with knobs and chords instead of getting out there and just playing music. And every moment wasted not learning music is just tone chasing. And that's okay if that's what you're after. But the point being, nobody is an authority on what a good tone is. And I want to make this very clear. If it sounds appealing to your ears in your room with your system, or if your guitar sounds good to you, then it's good. I spent $150 on my first guitar. It was a I think it was a little more than that. I actually bought my first guitar when I was like 16 years old and I was tripping on acid. I took the public transit to Oregon City and bought it at a used record store. It had the Hummingbird. It was like a red sunburst color. Total piece of crap. The action was horrible. But I learned on it and eventually moved up. When I was 18, I bought myself a Washburn Oscar Schmidt acoustic guitar. It was $150 brand new from the music store. I played that thing and said, this sounds pretty good. And thought maybe that's just because I'm ignorant. But it's fine. It works for me. Over the years, I've played several acoustic guitars. I've played some really nice people's, a couple of Martins. I haven't played a whole lot. I'm definitely not a guy who's out in the community all the time playing guitars, but I've played quite a few acoustic guitars since then. And only one or two have really had a feel that even remotely makes me feel good about, like, the same feel as mine. I looked at the neck and realized it's like an 1 7/8 wide neck, where a lot of them are 1 3/4. It's the way it was made, and it just happens to be a feel that works for me. And it stays in tune, and it's frickin' sounds great. But there are purists out there who would never be dare seen with a guitar like that, right? Let alone one of the tuning pegs was replaced with a drywall screw. But that's the thing, and that's what I'm getting at. It's okay if your stuff is a little bit beat up, or it's not the top of the line brand, or if you don't have solid gold, stands for all of your stuff and diamond encrusted cell phones. I think it's ridiculous that people are always looking for, quote, the best, when all that really matters is what's best to you. And in all other aspects of people seeking the best clothes, the best this or that, I can understand their desire to be seen, to say, look at what I have, look, I have the best. But when it comes to music, this is where it's unique, because music is supposed to be enjoyed. It's supposed to be what you enjoy listening to. When I grab a record off the shelf here, Bob Dylan, I've got a whole bunch. it's the Beatles. I've got the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night. And I think that came out of the Beatles pile. I've got a whole bunch. Meet the Beatles, right? John Fogerty, Steve Miller Band, Deep Purple. It goes on, right? And all of these records sound fantastic, even with the clicks and pops of a slightly older record. I'm willing to buy a record that is used slightly and that has a little bit of character because I don't really mind. But naturally, I don't want something that's totally scratched up, right? So there's a certain amount of nostalgia. And there are people out there who, basically as record collectors, they buy the MFSL copies. Now that's the Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab. They're the ones who make the records that are basically the highest quality recordings, usually from the 8 or 16 track original studio tapes, right? So a band uses tape, and then they can record that directly onto a record and get a master recording, a very high quality recording. And that's great. Most people can't tell the difference, but it's there and it has the sticker on it and it tells people this is a collectible. And I think that's fine because it is a better recording and a better quality, and often the grooves are wider. And for those who aren't aware, the wider the grooves on a record, meaning sometimes a one record that was originally just one record, they'll turn it into two or a double LP because that allows for more information that the needle can travel down. A wider gap means more information. The thing is, if you're only collecting it and you're not listening to it, then what's the point? Now, I'm speaking from a collector's perspective. I'm one of the probably bad guys who does buy more than one copy of a record, and I will buy a couple different colors if it comes out with a custom release. Come to find out that the reason I do this, of course, is because if I buy 2 copies of a record for $25 each, and I keep one sealed, then after a year, when that record's worth 50 or $100, I can pop it up and sell it and make my money back and pay for my other one. I did that with my Ween box sets and some other records I have. Whole bunch of Appleseed Cast, which is a band from like Kansas. And I just love listening to the music I get. So it's very rare that I will buy a record and not listen to it. But there are some that I buy to sell, but usually only as a secondary record to one that I'm buying to listen to. So what I'm getting at is that I think that people get often quite lost in the details of what sounds good and what the right tone is, while missing the point of why they got into it in the first place. Think back. If you're an audiophile or a musician or a tone chaser, think back to the first time you sat down and listened to a good stereo system. That smile you got on your face, that feeling you had when the whole room just filled with a performance as if you were there at the concert or there in the studio. That feeling is something that is amazing. It's almost like a drug. And because of that serotonin rush you get when you hear such amazing music, you're consistently chasing that. And that's why tone chasing is like chasing the dragon, which is, of course, a saying that goes along for heroin addicts. It's very similar. You're always looking for that first high, that system that's going to beat the one that you heard before, that one speaker that you've just missed. And hey, once in a while we run into them. I bought a pair of, what were they, Bic Venturi bookshelf speakers, and hooked them up to this little Denon single unit that I have that I got at Goodwill too. And I was doing some work and I was filling out a bunch of orders, and I just turned on some music on these two little speakers, and I stopped. I listened. I started hearing sounds that I had never heard before in the music, just coming out of the woodwork. At a point when you discover a decent system, and decent speakers, and a good receiver or good amplifier, you will see music come alive in a way you never have before, a way you might have not even known was possible. And that will set you off on your audiophile tangent. But don't get carried away. Just remember, there's something called diminishing returns. When you go from a $100 stereo to a $1,000 stereo, there's a huge difference in quality, just like speakers. But when you go from 1,000 to 10,000, there's a little less quality, but it's still there. When you go from 10,000 to 100,000, it's a negligible difference. Anything beyond that is just spending money on Ferraris to stock away in some car garage that you'll never drive. So that, my friends, is my opinion on audio. I think it's all about listening to it. The same way when I play guitar, I like acoustic for the fact that there are no speakers, there's no wires, there's no cords, amplifiers, pedals, or any of that bullshit I have to deal with to get effects. I get the natural sound of the strings, play it through a wood instrument. When I'm bored with it, I put it down and it's done. And that's me. I love electric guitar, don't get me wrong, but we overcomplicate things, whether we are musicians, audiophiles, obsessed with records, obsessed with stereos. Don't get so obsessed with the system that you miss the actual content. Because ultimately the source material is what we're trying to reproduce. And if we forget that, then we're just collectors. Talk to you next time. Be well. Take care of yourself and downsize that system. You might not need a 7.1 surround sound, system to be happy. A couple bookshelf speakers, the right mentality, and the right setup, and the right room, and the right ears, and the right ear shape, and everything comes to life. So at any rate, I want to go finish setting up here and set up my turntable. I've got my new mark up here, and I think I'm going to set up some stuff eventually and get myself a little area where I can listen to my records again. Be well. Talk to y'all next time. Take care of each other, and don't buy into the hype. Yeah, don't believe you have to spend a bunch of money to get something. Some snake oil cables. It's not going to make you happier. Same with records. You can find them pretty cheap. You don't need a fancy copy. But to each their own. Peace out. Oh, by the way, hit thumbs up before you forget. And subscribe if you haven't. Because I have a lot of weird content and more stuff that you will probably like or dislike. And if you dislike it, at least you can have a subscription you can dislike on. And I also have a podcast called 15-Minute Free Thinking. I'll be doing one about NFTs shortly, I think. And the absurdity. It seems like I'm picking on things. I'm not a hater. I'm really not a hater. I actually, it's because I see so many people being harped on and hated on who are just getting into things like this. Like collecting records is an exciting hobby. Stereo, searching for tone is exciting. But you get these, these groups of these 60-year-old grumpy old dudes who that's their only thing and they just want to own it. It's like they want to be right about everything. This is the best. This is the latest. Just ignore those guys. Get on with what sounds good to you. Peace out.